I've been busily working away up on the bow here. There's a couple of things I've had to address, and that first one was the nacelles, our wave breakers. As you can see here, I've been able to fare them in, and they're ready for spray now. All I need to do is a light sand and then good clean, and then I can spray the gel coat on that, and then I'll get Janet in here to do the overhead polishing because I'm done working overhead. The other thing that I've been working on here is our anchor roller mount. Now that's very important. We actually had a moulding that actually moved out over the front, a bit like a sort of a longeron, I guess, out over the front. It was only about 12 inches long, but what I had to do was reinforce and build a box around it, and that's what I've done here. It's 20mm foam, and essentially that will give that just that last little lip a bit of support. Now that all has to be tied in and laminated and then faired and glassed, but you'll notice I've left a hole, and that hole is very important. That is going to have a stainless plate on it to give me access up inside it to actually access the bolts that are holding the anchor roller in place. So there's been a lot of thought go into that. It's not a very complicated structure, but I glued that in yesterday, and I'm just going to pull that apart now, and then I'll be able to start to tidy that in and integrate that in. I'm about to start to laminate the forebeam along here. I'll be putting in the layers on the front here to outside or externally glass that seam together, and then that'll be finished as well. So there's a lot going on right here, and it'd be nice to get this front part all finished and tidied up. My first job this afternoon is I've just set myself up over on the port side. I need to complete the slot, the adjustment slot that I made. I remember I split the deck way back when to increase the width by 15mm to match the hull because of the sagging of the hull mould. If we go back about almost 12 months ago, we fitted the hull to the deck, and got a problem because the hull had actually sagged about 15mm. This doesn't occur in new production boats these days because they've got steel frames in the work, whereas my mould had some big timber braces that it's obviously sagged over time, and having the hull and deck mould sitting together in that paddock for that some 9 years or so created a lot of weight on the hull, and therefore it had actually expanded. So it was a simple matter of getting in and grinding a slot in the side here where I can still keep it fair. So the laminating here is basically done. I just need to sand this back now so that I can actually get it fair. That'll be my next job, and then I'm going to move on to final lamination and final fairing of the actual forebeam of the boat, which is essentially a pretty robust structure. It's two 30mm panels going together and physically epoxying it together, glassing it together, and then there's a lot of composite angle involved up in the bow there, but all I really have to do is fill it with epoxy and then laminate the bow over, and then come back and fair and spray and shape and get that perfect. So I'm getting there, but at the moment I feel like a bit of a bad parent because I've neglected the whole front end of the boat. It's time to sort it out. And the next couple of weeks is going to be all about getting this thing to a reasonable level of completion to call it a boat, because we're actually going for our hull identification number and our new insurance and registration of the vessel. In saying that, I have a ton of things I need to do. I need to install the nacelles that Janet and I have been producing. I need to join the bow. Now, over 12 months ago, I joined the hull on the deck, but I have never joined the actual physical forebeam of the boat. It's not a forebeam, it's actually a solid bridge deck, so I do need to complete that. I need to complete the windlass hatch that sort of gone on the back burner of that project. So I've already done this side on the starboard side. I now need to get into the port side and sand that back. I've already done the laminating and the filling. I just need to get into the fairing and the completion of that so that I can ultimately spray it all, and then I'm going to work from the bow backwards, dealing with all of the stanchion bases, the modifications that I've been able to perform while I've been constructing the bow of the boat. So I'm just going to run you through those few things over the next few videos, how I'm actually getting in and doing those. I'm going to install the bow roller up on the bow sprit, I guess you'd call it, and that's going to need some modifications as well. So I've got a ton of work to do up here. It's all going to happen in the next month or so to make sure that I'm actually going to get this completed. For the past 12 months I've been wandering around on the front deck up here doing little jobs, and there hasn't been a lot to do up on the bow here because pretty much everything's inside. But over the last couple of months we've had a lot of work going here, windows, hatches going in, integration of the hull and the deck, and what's actually come to mind is the fact that I have some massive holes in the deck. That is my hatch openings, and I was watching La Vagabond the other day, and one of the little fellas fell through an open hatch, and I thought, you know, that could have been pretty lethal, and for me that would end this project. If I fell through one of these hatches, that would be it. And I've been getting comments from you guys, well, close your hatches up. I've had a couple of people actually really concerned that I'm going to fall through one. Well, the other day we were up here, Sam and I were doing the windows, and it almost came to pass. Sam actually almost put his foot through one of these, and I was a bit concerned that he might end up, you know, break a leg, break your back, break your neck, God knows what could happen, or even worse still, go over the side and end up dead. So it's time for me to cut out the hatches. I'm going to put the hatches in place, even if they're just sitting in there. At least if I walk on that and damage a hatch, it's better than damaging our bodies, because at least we can always buy a new one. So I'm going to get in, cut out all of my hatches and make sure they're all complete and they're all filled in, so that at least if we fall through, we're falling through a hatch and not through an opening that is basically a 6 to 10 foot drop through the middle of them. So yeah, I'll mark them out. I'm going to get cutting, and that'll be one of those jobs that has to be done later on anyway, but they're not going to be glued in place just yet. I've still got a bit of work to do around those hatches to get them right. Alright, that's all our hatches in, so there won't be anyone falling through holes anymore. Janet's laughing. And at least I'm going to keep these shut. Like, I'd rather walk on a hatch and damage a hatch than damage myself. Anyway, so I've got them in. Now, what I can do down on the hull side down here, because we glued in a wall panel yesterday, I can now, down here, just take you over the side here, I can now cut out these port lights that are here, because they're exactly the right size for the hatches that are going to go in place. So I can cut those out in 2 of those, so that's going to be really good to get the light back in, and I'll be able to put the Hort lights in. I've spent the last couple of days up on the bow, which has been really, really nice, because it's a lot warmer here first thing in the morning with the sun hitting the tent. Inside this boat, like a giant chili bin, or esky, I guess we call it here in Australia, an esky, like a cooler bin. Chili bin if you're a Kiwi, but I don't know what you call them in the US and Canada and Europe. But anyway, up here, because it's basically just a foam core boat, essentially it's just like a chili bin. So down here on the windlass box, now this hatch has been sort of eyeing me off for quite some time, and I realised as soon as I put all the foam in here to build it up and reshape it and relaminate it, that it wasn't going to be high enough once I installed the Muir windlass. So once that's in place there, I need to allow a good centimetre between it and the top of the hatch, and it wasn't going to do that. So I've actually come back in here, added a whole lot more foam, lifted it up by about 3 centimetres. That's caused the problem here. That means I now need to block in this area here, and what I'm intending to do now is to shape this down flat to the deck, so that any water that runs down here will run away. Well, you can sort of see what I'm getting here. I'm just building it up. It's like the pyramids. Just going to keep getting built up until I get to a point where I've got a shape. That's all been epoxied in place. So that's essentially by tomorrow morning, that's all going to be one solid piece. And then I'll be able to start shaping that. What I'm aiming to do here is to get it from the top of that hatch and go down and flow back into the deck all the way around. So it's actually going to be a pretty complicated structure by the time I get it done, but I've just got to do it one little bit at a time. You can't add too much and take too much away. I've got the back sort of roughly the shape I want it, just so it'll sort of spill some water, and then doing the sides here is going to take a little bit more effort. But yeah, at the moment it's just like building a pyramid. Just got to do it one block at a time, or one strip at a time, and hope ultimately you get the shape you're after. I'm going to spend an hour or so trying to shape this disaster area down here, and ultimately it's going to be quite thin, but it's all epoxied in place, so essentially it's all one piece, this whole thing. This is going to take a fair bit of shaping. I've already started up on the back section of it here. I've got to get it level with the top of this hatch, and this hatch is all going to be restored, so there's plenty of work to be done here, and there's plenty of modifications going on, and to get it all tied in so it sort of looks a little bit reasonable before I start to laminate it in. These sorts of things are just taking me, like over the last 4 days I've done nothing but come up and glued a little bit more on, and eventually we get to a stage where it's at this stage where we can start to shape it down, and then I might have to actually intervene and cut in and add more. It just depends on how it's starting to look. If it looks odd, there's no point in doing it, so I may as well do it right. And it's going to take a long time. I'm going to start with a flat disc, get a rough shape, and then I'll start to fine tune it with a little file sander and my roller sander. So we'll see how we go. There has been a considerable amount of work go into this area here. It took a lot of thought and a lot of decision making to bring me to the stage where I had to redesign it. Firstly, the original boat that or the last boat that they made out of these molds, they actually had a drum winch which was in here against this bulkhead that's right here, and the only access was through these forward hatches, and that would have meant head down in with your bum out, trying to get access into the chain and the windlass. And ultimately the drum winch really, I don't really think it's big enough for a boat this big. So I've purchased a Muir 2500 watt cheater. Now this is a beautiful piece of Australian engineering. It comes from Tasmania, and really glad to have an Australian brand on the boat here. Not sponsored, they did give me a great deal on it, but we're certainly not sponsored by them. And by the same token, I love to promote Australian manufacturing, because we're trying to build our country back up after all the hoo-ha that's gone on over the last few years, and I'd like to see more of this high quality Australian stuff come back into the market. But I do believe they are possibly the best windlass on the market as far as all the research I've done, and everyone that I know has them, loves them. Particularly the new model that I have here has a composite housing. So there's a whole lot of thought going into that. Now that required a lot of rethinking about how I was going to do this. Now originally when I did the deck mold, and I'll just take you back to when I made the deck part, I actually put a hatch rim in which was the same hatch rim as what I'm kneeling on here right now, and that looks like this. And basically I realised very quickly as soon as I laid up the deck that it wasn't going to be high enough. The anchor locker was only going to be around about 30 centimetres high. Now that's simply not high enough for 80 metres of 10mm chain. You're going to end up with a big pyramid up underneath and fouling the windlass. So and then that created a whole other issue that essentially, because it's not going to be high enough, how am I going to get around it? So what I did is I cut that hatch out and started to rebuild it all. And the first thing I did was I took that hatch that I cut out, and that's this, expanded it out to make it larger. Once I'd increased the height and built the windlass shelf, I was able then to determine the size of this. Now I've just raised it yet again, because I just realised that the hatch was going to be touching, or the underside of the hatch would be touching and scraping the top of the windlass, and I want a little bit of clearance there. I don't need much, only a centimetre or so, but enough to give it airflow. We don't want it hitting it, we don't want it vibrating and the like. So we expanded this out, and since then I've totally rebuilt this whole section, and this is now laminated and ready for sanding and feathering. And the shape, I'm very, very happy with it. I'll just do a bit of a scroll around the way the shape has developed over the last couple of months, and it has taken a bit of work. You know, I've sort of been working on it a day every now and then to get this done. But now that we have this, and we need to fabricate a hatch for it, and obviously we've given Janet that job. I've still got a bit of hand shaping to do down there, but you can sort of see where I'm getting to. That hatch that's on the foredeck up here, there's a mould that I've got for it, and I'm actually going to make one, and then I'm going to split it into 4 pieces, expand it out and make it fit that, and then I've got consistent hatches all the way along. Might even put a couple of drink holders in it. That might be an idea. I'm not really sure whether I'm going to do that or not, but that is a thought. And certainly if you look at it here, by raising it up now, I've actually got it high enough, and the good thing is that that's now high enough to contain the windlass. The only thing I'm concerned about now is drainage, so I may well bring the drain down to here so that all the water drains down here onto the foredeck that comes down off the deck, so it'll run down straight across here and down. But yeah, I'm going to buy a hose pipe to go here for the chain to go through, and then I can start to really finish this off. So I'm not far from, you know, finishing this part, and I've just got a little bit more foam ready to glue in there tomorrow, get shaping again, and then I'll start to hand shape it until it's all consistent. But it's definitely looking better than it looked about an hour ago. You can see I've actually been able to maintain the shape of the boat and keep the curves sort of consistent with the rest of the boat. And that's sort of always been my mantra the whole way along, is don't try to make something look ultra modern that doesn't suit the lines of the boat. I try to keep the curves, you know, reasonably consistent, and in every modification I've done. And this has been a pretty major one. This is certainly not the biggest one, but certainly is one of the more important ones, that I've got a good deep anchor hatch and also a good looking and more serviceable and usable area, and this will make a very, very nice table for sundowners. That's our plan. My amazing wife has knocked me up another hatch, and this one here is going to be for our windlass. Now the problem is I've expanded the windlass hatch out to around about 100 mil wider and longer to facilitate good access into our chain locker. You'll note that I've actually drawn some black lines on here. I'm actually going to cut it into 4 pieces so that I can expand it out equally to match the windlass hatch that I've actually increased the outer rim. So by cutting it here, I can actually put it out into the outer corners of the hatch and then infill it to make a hatch that's going to be suitable for that particular box. So a bit of a job ahead, but it's not that hard. All you need to do is turn it upside down, weigh it down, laminate the gap, and then ultimately come back in and fair the top side. Now I do have to be considerate of the fact that I want some anti-slip on it so people can walk on it, so I'll try not to disturb this too much. But I am actually going to have to change it a little bit. I might end up with a strip down the middle and another one down the center just to finish the whole job. Or I could make a whole panel of anti-slip, get rid of what's on there, and glue some new stuff down. There's a couple of things I can do there, but at this stage I'm just going to cut this on the bandsaw, and then I'll be able to come back and begin the process of expanding this hatch out. And what we're working on now is basically get these 4 components of this hatch that I've cut up, sit them in place. And what I'll do is I'll hot glue it together in a frame. Yesterday afternoon I left Janet up in the factory while I was up on the boat to start the laminating of the expanded hatch. It was a pretty simple process. We basically waxed up a smooth board that I laid up all the internal linings on, and we weighed down each corner, and obviously we had this MDF glued in place, and that held everything in place to the exact size of the hatch. And she's done a temporary or a first layup of just three layers of chop matting on here to hold the hatch together, and then we're going to remove the peel ply off, get rid of these braces, and then completely laminate the whole thing, and that will give us our final hatch size. So what's left for me now is just to demold it. And the best thing to do is crack a couple of wedges under it just to get it loose. Now I did wax this, so I'm hoping it does release. It should. Yep, that's going to come up nice. And all I'm trying to do is just break the seal so that we can get our hatch. And as you can see, we now have our completed hatch, which is really, really good, because what this means is now that we can just laminate the whole back of it again, and basically the whole thing will be completed, and then I can start to work out how I'm going to make it look good. So in having that first part laminated on there, it really doesn't matter what it looks like, because all I'm after was the smooth surface equal in height to the anti-slip, so that I can basically get a bit of a pattern together. I may do another anti-slip down the center. I may even replace the entire anti-slip with a piece that I've already fabricated, but for now we'll just see if it actually fits the hatch. Alright, so, and it should fit. Beautiful. That is how we expand out a hatch, and basically the completing I'm going to leave to Janet.
Yeah, it's not easy what you're asking.
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll get some masking tape. So we're going to lay up a few layers, probably a couple of layers of 300 over the gaps, and then 3 or so layers of 600 just to give it some body, and then we can reshape the whole top of it.
Yeah.
Doing a great job, Jan. And this is the final result. So this now can be cleaned up, but this will fit the surround that fits underneath, and then the whole thing will work in its entirety. And what we need to do though is basically do a bit of detailed work on it, just to get it to the point that I can make it all one level surface. Now that could involve firstly sanding off the existing anti-slip, or I can actually round this off and make it a feature and have a small slip through the middle here and another piece down here. I'm not really sure how I'm going to do that, but first things first, I'm going to get the edges ground off it. I need to adjust the height a little bit to fit the rim underneath, and then I need to go and test fit it up in the boat to make sure that it's all going to fit okay. Janet's actually applied foam to the underside of this already, so we glued a 10mm foam core to the base of it, and I do need to scallop it out underneath where the hinges go down the bottom there, and just so I can actually get a good base for the hinge mounts. But yeah, no, that's looking really, really good, and although it looks a bit rough at the moment, the actual rim looks pretty horrible because I've actually sanded all the way around the edges, but that's how I'm going to laminate it into that new hatch surround that I've made up on the deck. And the whole thing will come together pretty quickly. And 3 or 4 days later, she's finished it. So it is now ready to go. Picture of how this whole arrangement is going to work, and I think it's just bloody fantastic. Look at how this whole thing has turned out, and what a modification. In fact, it's become a massive feature of the front of the boat here. The other thing too is it's become almost like a table for drinks, and a nice sort of a lounge suite coffee table, I guess you'd call it, and certainly strong enough that you can actually walk on this thing. I can walk on this whole hatch. I'm standing on this as we speak, and I haven't even laminated that yet. We haven't even laminated underneath and reinforced the foam. So you know, we've got a really strong compartment there, and that now can all be glassed in, and I'm absolutely delighted with how that's come up. Really magic modification to an otherwise problem that I had to sort out pretty quickly, and I've taken 12 months to figure this out, get it all right, and I think it was well worth the effort.